nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. Frustrate podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
Hello and welcome to a Sunday night edition of the Managing Madrid Podcast. We are recording this at nearly 1 a.m. Madrid time, and we're going to break down a game that was very eventful for 0-0, and a game that was a roller coaster of sorts, and because it was a game that Real Madrid played pretty well in, could not finish their chances, nearly conceded a couple times at the end, and dropped 2 points. And joining me to make sense of it all is a man who is just coming back from the Bernabeu. He got on the metro after Carlo Ancelotti's press conference, or maybe after Alguacil's press conference. I think that one came after, and hopped on the metro and is home now in his cozy living room in Madrid. And we're going to break it down. Euan, how you doing, man?
Yeah, good. You say cozy. Let's see.
Are we going to talk about the weather first?
My goodness, it's cold.
Well,
People think Spain just never gets cold, but in the middle of January, late January, cold. February in Madrid, it's like 0 degrees.
Especially in open air like that. Yeah,
I know you're in Canada, so you're 0 degrees. Look out the t-shirts. But for people in Madrid, this is about as cold as the Bernabeu gets. Courtois was even complaining about it.
I saw that. We had a balmy 3 degrees here in Canada. It was magical warmer weather. So I was thinking about you this whole time because the comms on ESPN were talking about how cold it is in Madrid, and then Courtois was talking about it after the game, and I was like, I wonder if Euan's suffering right now. Does he have his gloves on? Are the heaters working? What's going on? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a new press area in the Bernabeu since they returned after the World Cup. They've opened a brand new press area, which is a bit higher up. Nothing really works. The Wi-Fi doesn't really work, and actually that was maybe a blessing because the fact the Wi-Fi didn't work meant I wasn't actually typing as much during the game as I normally do. Normally trying to get the free answers thing up on full time, but there was no way because there's no Wi-Fi. So actually I could keep my hands in my pockets most of the game, but whenever I did bring them out to type a note, just so many typos. The fingers, they don't really work. You just look up at what you've written, it's just a bunch of red squiggles because it's too cold to coordinate. So pretty cold, but yeah, the football was at least something. It wasn't a poor game. That's the worst one. It's a terrible game and it's cold, which actually seems to coincide. There's been, I think, a lot of cold Bernabeu, January, February, Real Madrid games where the team don't actually play that much better. But at least this one, as much as it was a 0-0, anyone that just looks at the score might think, "Oh, what a dud." No, this was good fun. Second versus third in La Liga, and they put on a show.
I think I told you this maybe last time. I can't remember, but my first experience as press at Vallecas, it's in a little room indoor with a window.
Yeah,
I was like, this is really weird, but I kind of appreciated it because there was no wind, and that was December. I think it was pretty cold then too. I had a question though. What is the view like? Because I don't know if I've ever been up that high, so I'm curious to know what that experience is like. Is it harder to watch the game?
Yeah, I mean, like, to put it one way, pretty much everything about the new press area is worse than before.
Except for the chairs in the press conference room.
In the press conference room, new comfy chairs. The new chairs in the new press area, worse. Everything's kind of worse. But that's because the press area before was a privileged position. It was right on the 5th floor of the Bernabeu. Really good view. Like for most European stadiums, the press area isn't situated as good as the old Bernabeu one was. And that's why they moved it to make some VIP seats there. So now it's on the 8th floor. So I don't know, I would say maybe 30 to 40 meters higher up. So yeah, of course, it's it really is harder to see what's going on. You're looking at the kind of the numbers on the back of the shirts, maybe it's just my eyesight, but sometimes you're like, there was one point I was like, is Benzema coming short for a corner? And I was like, oh no, that's not a 9, that's an 8, that's Kroos. It's they've moved us up to the out of the way, and some lucky people paying who knows how much will take the seats that we used to sit on.
Do what you got to do, Florentino, to make more money. The journalists will pay the price.
He's got vending machines in there as well, and the new press area. You now got to pay, I don't know, €1 for your coffee, which many people did tonight to keep warm. So the journalists, cold hands.
There's no more free drinks.
Free water, but I think that's it. Now there's vending machines.
They used to literally give free hot chocolate.
Yeah.
You did the
chocolate, coffee. Yeah, now water for sure still. And then vending machines. So I guess the journalists are paying for the stadium reconstruction, or some of these new contracts that are coming.
I will
coffee
now,
by coffee.
I will now forever appreciate the Stamford Bridge press experience. It's literally on the field behind the bench. You can hear the coaches talk. There's a buffet. There's like chefs cutting roast beef. There's salad, unlimited salad. Anyways, let's talk about football.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to get your perspective on this one. There's so many places we could start. I just want to say this. I think this was a good performance. I think that my hunch, and I could be wrong, I've been wrong plenty of times with my hunch and my predictions. I think we'll look back on this game and think that was a step in the right direction. And I know that a lot of Madridistas will scream at me hearing this, saying, our expectations are much higher at Real Madrid. We don't do these 0-0s. We can't be this bad at finishing. All I'm saying is that these guys are humans, not robots. I think if you replay this 9 times out of 10, you're up 1-0 at least when the subs come in. I think the chance creation and the pressing was great. I love what I saw for the majority of that game. Carlo said after the game that we played great from 1 to 90. I don't know if I would take it that far. I think it was maybe 1 until 75 or whenever the subs were made, to be quite honest. We'll get to that. But I thought it was a good performance. And I looked at this and I said, the whole point of looking at football with a process-oriented lens rather than a results-based lens is that, not to say that process is more important than results, but you have to look at the process and say, and look at this game and say, okay, we created chances in this game, and I barely have any notes on Rodrygo, Militao. Any notes I have on Militao are generally because he was getting in the offensive third. And Courtois only had a few saves to make. The fact that we can complain about, the lack of offensive production in terms of goals. We also conceded very little chances, and that's because we were defending high up the pitch. I think it's a really great thing if we don't have notes on Rodrygo and Courtois. I think it was a step in the right direction because we generate more chances than we usually do. And that's just math. At some point, these shots will go in. And if you're creating more opportunities, I think you just got to keep going at it. And I'm glad Carlo acknowledged that part of it after the game. I think if you just keep going this route, I think it's a good sign. Now, there is the caveat that Real Sociedad were missing a lot of good players. They also made this game a little bit more open than they probably should have. They got away with some things, missing 2 really key players in Merino and Silva. And Sadik, who of course just hasn't played, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on the performance, and we can get into the nitty gritty in a bit. But what was your overall takeaway?
Yeah, I totally agree. This was a good performance. You said that, Ancelotti said that after the game, and you could tell he was really proud about this one. He doesn't normally sort of describe the performance in, this was good, this was bad. He talked about more specific things, but he just, like you said, 1 to 90 minutes, he mentioned, he said just in general, this was a good performance. And he said this line a couple of times as if he really wanted this one to stick, was, we didn't let Real Sociedad play the way they normally play. As in, I think what he meant by that is Real Sociedad are a really good team, and when they play the way they play, they can destroy a lot of teams. And I think Ancelotti must have made a point of this before the game to his players. Like, we cannot get destroyed the same way that they score their goals week in, week out. And the fact that they managed to cut that out and stop that, really, whenever Real Sociedad won the ball back, they have so many good players in the midfield that can take one or two touches, get out of tight spaces. And that happened a lot of times. You know, it looked like one player was about to evade a tackle, but then there was someone else from Real Madrid right there to stop them getting the counter-attack going. So Real Madrid, you could see it almost just like from the really high up view. There were so many chances that Real Sociedad had where it looked like the counter-attack was on. Sorloth made an amazing run, and before they could be found, someone was there to pinch the ball. So I think Ancelotti was really proud of the way that they just didn't let Real Sociedad dictate this game. And this is a thing we have to keep in mind. You mentioned that they had some players out. Real Madrid obviously did too. Real Sociedad are the third place team in La Liga. You know, they're there for a reason. And imagine, put it this way, some of the other years, in previous years when Atletico Madrid finished third, or some of the years when Barcelona finished third, would a 0-0, would a draw at home against Atletico or Barcelona when you dominated and you just didn't take your chances, would that be viewed as a good result? Absolutely. So this year, the third best team in La Liga isn't Atletico. They're at least fourth. So you have to consider that Real Sociedad are going to take a lot of points off a lot of teams. It's a shame for Real Madrid that Real Sociedad hosted Barcelona really at the start of the season before they got going, lost that game 4-1. But they can give Barcelona a game at the Camp Nou next time. They just did in the Cup, only lost 1-0 with 10 men. So this might be viewed as 2 drop points, but when you consider this is the third best team in the country and they're going to take a lot of points off a lot of teams and be up there, I think, by the end of the season, maybe this isn't a bad result. And if you just look at the performance, as Ancelotti said, it was one of the best of the season.
I also think to the point you made about Real Sociedad, they're obviously really good. Their form up until now has been incredible for what 2-3 months now.
Yep.
And I do think it's important to state that we didn't let them play the way they want to play. And I think it's also important to state that this wasn't them just a matter of missing players and then changing the way they play. I think to an extent they had to tweak it a little bit, but they tried to press. They tried to bring the line high. You saw that the chances we had in the first half were not against a low block team. Those are passes over the top, exploiting the high line, getting the ball to Vinicius, carrying the ball really quick through their lines. These guys were not playing a deep, compact defensive block. They tried to bring the game to us. And I think the fact that we were winning the ball in those key areas made a difference. And you mentioned some of that, the pressing and stuff. I think to expand on that point, I was really impressed with our counter press specifically. I think our press when Real Sociedad were building up from the back was okay and not even that great, but it's our counter press that was really incredible. And in particular, I want to highlight one player, although there were many who were winning the ball back really quickly, like Rodrygo, like Fede, like Kroos. Kroos had a couple of incredible ones. Militao getting up the field. I don't know how he got there, especially in the second half. But the one that really stood out to me in that aspect was Ceballos.
Yeah.
It's so weird to me. I don't know how he does it, because it felt like no matter where we lost the ball, it was him that would just pop up on wherever we lost it and win it back immediately. And on some level, I can understand subbing him, because I don't know if it's humanly possible for him to sustain that amount of energy that he puts out on a 90-minute basis. At the same time, you really saw the deflation when he came out, I think, because he was such a key contributor both to winning the ball up the field, but also getting it up the field as soon as he got it, like just getting the ball into the box. Or if he couldn't, he would pass it immediately and then move into space where he could progress the ball. I think he's been a revelation in the last few games. This is really incredible. Do you remember, Euan, when he was with Betis, how good he was and how sought after he was? Doesn't this remind you of that version of him?
Yeah, I remember that summer where it was Madrid and Barca fighting to get him, and that was the main transfer story. This was like the future of the Spain national team fighting to get him, and his career hasn't quite panned out the way it was. But, you know, this reminds me of that Ceballos, but also not, because some of the stuff he's doing is not really what he was known for at Betis. He was known for what he did on the ball, how he conducted their attack. What you're talking about is how he wins the ball back and then gets play going. And it's absolutely that. It's the winning those second balls. And he always just, I think you kind of alluded to it. He always just seems to know where the ball is going to be. And kind of listen to you talk there. It kind of reminded me. Do you remember in The Last Dance they're doing the bit on Dennis Rodman? And they're talking about how he would always get rebounds. He'd always know where to be, and basically they would just practice him like throwing a basketball off like obscure like surfaces, like throw a basketball at a chair and see where it goes, because you can't predict where it's going to bounce when it hits a point, when it hits a soft bit, when it hits a hard bit, and he would just be able to sort of anticipate where it would go. I don't know how Ceballos does it, but he just always kind of seems to understand the way a player jumps up for a ball to head it. He kind of has a sense of how that ball's going to come down and where and how to take it. And that's been more important, I think, than anything he's done on the ball, partly because he wouldn't be on the ball as much if he wasn't doing that. So the Ceballos revelation is an interesting one to me, because I think everyone got carried away when he came on against Villarreal. He had that half hour. It reminded me of and I think we've spoken about this, the Hazard game against Celtic away, where the stats were amazing. You know, Hazard had a goal, assist, a pre-assist. Ceballos basically did the same thing. He had a goal, assist, and his cross provoked one of the other goals. Everyone kind of got blown away by those stats, and I think he deserved another opportunity because of his impact off the bench in that way. But what he's done in the game since then hasn't really been similar to what he did against Villarreal. That was a very different kind of game, a comeback. What he has done is control the midfield, win the ball back, pass, not crazy passes, not driving forward all the time, making the right pass, letting the other players around him. And remember, when he's playing alongside Vinicius, Benzema, Rodrygo, Asensio, Valverde, when he's playing in midfield, Ceballos knows that he's got options alongside him. And he's just kind of evolved, I think, from the midfielder he was at Real Betis, and even from the midfielder he was in that crazy half hour at Villarreal.
I think it's also really impressive that he just has an understanding with his teammates too. It's not something you see too often with a player who hasn't played that much in the last 2 years or so. He hasn't been, at least he hasn't been on the playing field of, you know, in terms of minutes.
It's the training. He's training with these guys every single day, and that's something, you know, he has something that if they were to go and buy a replacement, some attractive name on the market, he has something that those players won't have, which is what you're saying, training at Valdebebas with these players every day for the past few years, even if he's not always been on the pitch with them.
I asked this to Lucas on Friday on the podcast. I'm curious to get your thoughts. Do you think as the season goes on, as it progresses, we're slipping away from the idea slowly of Kroos and Modric both being here next season?
It's interesting you say we. I wonder if it's they. I think at the World Cup pause, both of them, I think, were ready to renew. But I think the team as a whole is moving away from them a little bit. I think with Modric, we have to remember, he went far in the World Cup. He played as many games as you could possibly play, up to the third place playoff. Ancelotti even said Kroos and Modric are different cases. Kroos didn't go to the World Cup, Modric did. They're both being rested, rotated for different reasons. But yeah, the young players are coming through. Even Valverde as a midfielder is taking one of their spots, and that's not really because of Valverde, but actually because of Rodrygo in a roundabout way, is kind of taking one of Modric or Kroos' spots. And yeah, if they really go the rest of the season not playing much, coming on, I think it was minute 76, this game that Modric comes on, if they keep going the rest of the season like that, they might consider, is this worth it? We've won everything. We have no reason to stay other than we love playing football and we're going to retire at Real Madrid. And I think that's the question, not so much like, you know, does the team need them? Does the team start to move away from them? If Ancelotti moves away from them too much, they might consider retiring. But you also have the perfect coach for that situation, because Ancelotti he's not just a man manager. This is what one of his labels always is, but he is a man manager and he's a squad and club manager too. And he's the kind of guy that if Modric and Kroos need to play some more minutes to be able to renew, he's the kind of guy that knows all these behind the scene situations. And I think, but it's a tightrope, because you do risk leaving them out in the cold too much, literally, and they might decide to hang it up.
They definitely are two different cases, but you know, Modric strikes me as the type of figure who loves playing it so much that if he can still play at whatever level in the squad, he'll stick around, even if it's not in the starting role. Kroos, I feel, is more of the kind of guy like, I want to go out on top and not linger around, as a squad player. I mean, that's just again, that's not inside information.
You look at their ages, and the fact we're talking about them in the same breath as in they're in the same stage of their career.
Yeah,
kind of shows you it, because Kroos is already, like 4 years younger. So, we already know that Kroos has already caught up to Modric in the sense of discussing retirement at the same time. He might overtake him, and Kroos might actually retire first.
So part of the reason I asked that question too is that I mentioned this. Matt and I were talking, but I also mentioned this on Twitter the other day, that I think we have enough data now that says when you pair Kroos and Modric together, it's not necessarily your best midfield pairing in terms of especially if you do what you want to do today, which is aggressive, counter-pressing, and control in the final third. The energy and Fede, this was Fede's best game since the World Cup. It was nice to see Fede rejuvenated and back playing with that kind of fire. He had 4 shots today before he was subbed out. I mean, that was just, and I think 3 key passes. I had to look at it again, which was a game high, but he looked good again. And I think just the fact that you had that younger dynamic midfield meant you could play a different style of football. And I also think if you're going to put Kroos as the single pivot, this is the kind of way to do it. He's not meant to play a single pivot where he's playing in a deep block, chasing people around. This is how you do it. This is how, you're controlling the game. He barely misplaced the pass. I think he had 97% by the end of it. He didn't misplace a pass until the second half. This is the way to do it. But then you can kind of see the dynamic change when you put Modric and Kroos together. And I think, look, at some point you got to make subs. I'm not going to necessarily say they were bad subs to make. I think any team in the world would love to bring on Luka Modric in the second half. I think Asensio had one really nice pass. But it's very clear also that the tempo slowed down for Real Madrid when Ceballos and Valverde came out. And at some point, maybe Ceballos just couldn't sustain, or if Fede couldn't. That's more for Carlo to know, not me. But I think there is an argument to be made that maybe you even though Ceballos was having, even though Kroos was having a good game, maybe he's the one you bring out for Modric because of this. Because I think the tempo just slows down a little bit too much. Energy slows down a little bit too much when you have those two on the field. So I just kind of feel like right now, because we talked about Ceballos, the other one, Camavinga, again, even though he's not playing in his best position, was really good. These are the two guys I wrote about this week too. Those two are really good again today. Do you think the dynamic just kind of changed after the subs?
Yeah, so just to pick up a couple of things you said there, the Kroos is a single pivot. Ancelotti spoke about this a couple of weeks ago in the press conference and said putting it simply, when Real Madrid are playing a game where they expect to have control, he wants Kroos as a single pivot. And when they're playing a game where they expect a lot of defending, he wants Camavinga. This Real Sociedad, I think this is why Ancelotti was so nervous and so keen to stop them playing their game. Real Sociedad are the kind of team you have to defend a lot. But because of injuries, Camavinga was needed at left back, so Kroos had to play there. But I don't think this was Ancelotti's ideal choice, a Kroos single pivot for Real Sociedad. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing, which kind of goes with this, is we don't have Tchouameni. We're forgetting about this a little bit.
Yeah.
Modric and Kroos in January together has not worked. But Modric, Kroos and Tchouameni was working quite okay the first half of the season. So all the poor Modric and Kroos performances we've seen since the World Cup basically have been without Tchouameni, which is just something to keep in mind. And yeah, again, going then to the substitutions, it kind of comes back to what I'm saying. It is the injuries, even though they're injuries mostly at fullback, they do play a part because that was taking Camavinga away from the midfield, and there just weren't so many options. And Ancelotti said this in the press conference. If you go on Managing Madrid, you'll see all the quotes. But this was how he explained it: was we were playing so well, such a good game. I didn't want to change anything because we were playing so well, but we had to make changes just because of tired legs, just for freshness. So the fact he said that, I mean, I think he was almost making the point that he wouldn't have made a single sub tactically if he didn't have to, because he was absolutely delighted with how it was going tactically. But he had to change some players for fresh legs, and I guess when he says that, that must mean that the players who were the tiredest were the ones who came off. So I guess that explains it. And then when you look at the options who could have come on, the fact that Camavinga, the versatile player who normally comes on, was playing left back and doing so well there, you wouldn't want to move him mid-game. It kind of all just comes back weirdly to the fact that Carvajal, Lucas, Alaba, Mondi were all injured. It kind of dictated today's midfield in a weird way.
Yeah, I also do wonder the assessment and the evaluation of who's tired and who's not. Is it predetermined? Is it, I mean, obviously they're right there. They can kind of see things. They can even communicate to each other. But sometimes subs are predetermined and even pre-scheduled. I mean, we've heard Ancelotti and Zidane both talk about that aspect of it before. And that's sometimes in consultation with Pintus, obviously, or how that's determined, or if it's just a kind of a game-to-game thing with regards to today, where they just assessed that they were more tired and they had to come off, because Fede and Ceballos were really important in this game. I want to talk about Vinicius, a guy who has been heavily criticized today for his lack of finishing. Today. Where do you stand? Today, even more so, I'd say. But yeah, all season.
For the, I mean, there weren't that many shots of his that were like, there was one that he kind of just hit wide in the first half that I think was the best chance. I don't know exactly the XG and all these kind of things, but just from sitting up in the in the skies there, the chance that kind of struck me as this should be a goal was the one in the first half, and it missed by just a little bit.
Yeah,
I've said this a bunch of times in the podcast. The thing I hate the most is when commentators say, "Oh, he needs to hit the target there." Yeah, it's like easy to just hit it right to the goalkeeper's chest. If you want to actually score, you do need to aim for the corners, and if you aim for the corners, you might miss. So that one was really close. And then there was a few in the second half, but I don't think any of them were absolutely clear. And he created so much, second half especially, coming inside, linking up with Camavinga, which I think we'll talk about. He did so much that I don't think the finishing was too poor in this one. And, even though he had that hot streak last season, I think we all know finishing isn't his strong point. And when you have Benzema alongside and other players, normally it doesn't have to be. So, I'm not. Maybe you criticise Vinicius for that, but I don't know why people are starting to criticise him for that today. I mean, this is what Vinicius is. Today's performance was a normal Vinicius performance, maybe even a little bit above his average.
So for those who are watching on YouTube, I just pulled up the XG here on the share screen. The two I think that he was most criticized for is this one. One is the one I think you mentioned in the first half.
Yeah,
this is the 13th
that's the
minute.
one. But that's the one that rolls just wide. Like, he kind of...
Well, this is the one where he just nutmegs Ayhan Munoz too, and then gets into that channel, I think, right?
Yeah.
And then the second one is the one where he has a really nice touch to get past two men and then gets into this position. He tries to chip Ramiro, and Ramiro saves it, and it goes over the bar. So I guess just some thoughts on this. And you mentioned something. He had 9 completed dribbles tonight, which is an insane number. You mentioned that this is a classic Vinicius performance. I thought, okay, so this is one thing I want to say about Vinicius that I think a lot of people miss when they criticize him, is that he creates like 95% of the chances he misses. Like most players can't even get to those positions or create them to begin with. And then he gets criticized for missing it, rather than praised for getting the team or himself in that position. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. I think his decision-making has been pretty poor this season, but he's also done a lot of good things. And this is where I stand on it. Can he improve? Yeah. I think we do have to also acknowledge that Ramiro made a couple good saves.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if people fully appreciate enough how good Vinicius actually is and how important it is to have players who can just create that stuff, like a high volume of it. It's not easy to have that kind of player in world football. Like, these are the most sought after players, the players who can break lines and create out of nothing. And he does that. I think eventually he'll start scoring, and I think he'll come good. I think last season was not an anomaly. I think he obviously improved from 2 years ago with regards to his finishing last season. And I think some of the stuff he's missing now is down to bad luck. That's my assessment of it. I don't think the math adds up that he won't eventually start scoring. He's getting enough chances. He's dribbling well enough to get himself into good positions to score. Again, I'm not going to give him a pass. I'm not saying he can't improve. I think he can. But I do think some of this is a little bit over the top, the way we criticize his lack of finish, because I think that some of this finishing stuff, like strikers go in hot and cold streaks all the time, unless you're an absolute freak like Erling Haaland or Lionel Messi. I mean, look, even Cristiano Ronaldo went through big slumps even during his peak, and he rebounded and came good. I think Vinicius will come good. Admittedly, like, he's not scoring the way he was last season, but I think he'll come good. That's my prediction.
No, I totally agree. I think he absolutely is a streaky player. You know, the players who go on these streaks tend to be players who really need the confidence and whatever. And if there's one thing we know about Vinicius, is that he's an emotional player. You know, Ancelotti says every second press conference he needs to focus. You see him in the stadium, he's often not focused. He's, you know, getting the crowd going. He did that a couple of times tonight. He doesn't get a free kick. He, you know, moans about it and laments it for a good minute or whatever. We know he's an emotional player, and emotional players are the players who, when they score one or two, they feel good. They feel like they're the best player in the world, and they keep scoring them. And when they've not scored for a while, when they get frustrated, when things aren't going their way, they're the kind of player that have a little second of hesitation before they shoot. And we saw that last season when we had that famous comment from Ancelotti. You know, I told him to just take 2 touches. The reason that became such a thing, like, Ancelotti's cured Vinicius, it was because he was scoring so many goals in a row. But I think the reason he was shooting so much quicker and so decisively wasn't just Ancelotti. It was that he felt good, he felt confident, he didn't need that extra touch. So once he gets 1 or 2, I think he'll get that back. I really thought after scoring against the derby, even though, you know, Atletico pretty much, you know, lit up in green and pointed the way to goal, and one of the easiest goals he scored in his life, I thought that might be a catalyst for him to come and take a goal in this game. And it very, very nearly did. It's a game of fine margins. And you imagine he scores that Atletico goal, which meant so much to him. One of the ones today, you know, goes just inside the post or just over Ramiro's hand. And suddenly he's got 2 in 2 games, 2 in 3 days, and that could be him off. So hopefully this doesn't put him off too much, the fact he didn't finish anything today, because he was doing everything else right. And I think once he gets 1 or 2 in a short period of time, that'll be deadly, like it was last season.
Also, the 1-2 touch thing, I think he pretty well abided by that today, right? I can't think of a case where he was taking too many touches to shoot today.
No, apart from when he was too far away from goal and had to get a bit closer.
Yeah.
No, really, the technique. Like I said, with that one that went just past the post, I really can't criticise that technique. Like, that's what you should be doing, is aiming for the far corner there, because, okay, there's maybe the other corner too, but aiming for that corner is better than just hitting it in hope and, you know, it goes straight at Ramiro and is saved. You know, it's at least you're beating the goalkeeper and almost squeezing it in the far post. So yeah, you know, he'll be fine. I think we've kind of come to this conclusion. He's a streaky player, and once he gets 1 or 2, I think he could be off.
So 2 of my favorite things to read after a game. One is your 3 questions, 3 answers article. The other one is Sam's stats article after the game. I always learn new things.
What did he have?
Well, yours wasn't posted yet, but this is some crazy stuff from Sam. I mean, I think this one's, if you had to guess how many times Alex Ramiro, Real Sociedad's goalkeeper, has saved as many shots as he did today, how many times has he done that in his career?
Oof. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many saves it was in the end, like, but big saves, there was a few.
It was, I can't see the number. But anyways, the answer is 0. Today is the most he's ever saved in one La Liga match.
Amazing.
So this is kind of, I think people kind of ignore this stuff when they, and this is the other crazy one. And I think it's just hilarious and ironic because I thought we played well and I want us to continue playing like this. This is the first time Real Madrid have failed to score this season.
Mm-hmm.
And there was the Managing Madrid Twitter account put out a half joke on Twitter saying that classic Real Madrid is scoring 5 goals from an XG of 0.01, but then scoring 0 goals from an XG of 0.10. But I also do want to point out the XG wasn't nearly as high as I thought it was. It was only 1.28. It was a high volume of chances, but the only real clear-cut ones, there was really only a couple. But a lot of good attacking play, basically.
A lot of dangerous balls into the box that actually don't end up showing on XG because there wasn't maybe a shot or,
Yeah. I thought we should talk about Rodrygo. I thought he was really good tonight. What was your assessment of his role in his performance?
I mean, excited for him that he got the start he deserves, that he's deserved for a few weeks now. And it makes such a difference to Vinicius in one way. Part of the reason Vinicius had so much space is because you can't really ignore the other side as much as you can with certain players who start there, whether it's Fede or Asensio for different reasons. And that just opened up the whole thing. And both of them combining well with Benzema. Benzema, not his best game, not his most involved game, but he looked equally comfortable laying it off to Vinicius as to Rodrygo, and then Rodrygo drifting inside doing what he does. And like another good performance from him. And I think, he should be a starter for Real Madrid, a bit like Camavinga probably should, but because he's so versatile, he kind of gets put everywhere else and still doesn't have his own role. But another good one from him.
I also just like the fact that his link-up play all over the field was good. I mean, his pressing was good, but it seemed like he connected well with everyone. And we often talk about how can we help generate more offense? I think fluidity has been one answer in some way, because some of Real Madrid's problems in the past few months and even last season were predictability. Whereas this was kind of more of that, if you want to take it all the way back to Isco and the diamond, that was unpredictable to play against. Mm-hmm. Rodrygo was going to the right, linking up with Fede, coming down the middle a lot. His heat map was actually mostly down the middle or to the left side, even overloading that left side with Vinicius and Benzema. He was linking up everywhere. His dribbling was incredible this game. Ball carrying was great. I don't know how he got past some of those markers because it looked like there was no space to work with. I thought Rodrygo was very, very good. And I agree. I think he should be a starter. I like him in this role in particular because you mentioned Celtic a while ago in this podcast. One of the other fun performances of Real Madrid this season, Rodrygo was playing as in a central role that game as well. I think Benzema didn't play that game. That was the one difference. So it was more of a false nine role. But, I in the more central roles, he's done really well.
Yeah, I think that if it's the home one, that's one that Benzema did play, like the only game he played in the build-up to the World Cup for some reason. The one that kind of meant nothing, but Carlo things. But I don't know, so I guess you saw the quote from pre-match in this one where Ancelotti was talking about a 4-2-3-1, which has been asked a few times. Yeah. Basically because Camavinga, to provide a bit of context to everyone, Camavinga has been doing so well, so the question is what happens when Tchouameni comes back? Could they play together? And then evolving on this in Saturday's press conference was the idea, well, what if you have the double pivot and then a 4-2-3-1 and the middle of the three is Rodrygo? And Ancelotti sort of, listened to, that could work. That could be his best position. And when you look at Rodrygo and the way that he can play right wing, play left wing, play as a centre forward, but always sort of drifts towards that number 10 role whenever he plays those roles, maybe that is his right position. And I don't know, maybe he listened to the press conference and not the team talk and thought that was what he was supposed to do today. But this is, I think very much medium term, long term, next season term. But interesting that Carlo Ancelotti is even sort of acknowledging these kind of questions from journalists, whereas Zidane would just sort of shake his head and mutter in French.
Well, I like that theoretical lineup of him in a 10 in a 4-2-3-1. If you piece all things together, Carlo has talked about 4-2-3-1 and Rodrigo as a 10. He's also spoken about Camavinga and Tchouameni and double pivot. I think that could definitely work in certain games. The Camavinga thing, assuming that he'll go back to central midfield at some point, I mean, as good as he's been, I hope it's not like one of those things where you just fast forward 2-3 years and all of a sudden he's like Lucas Vazquez. He has a new position. It's just a wing back now. I hope that's not what happens. But I have to say I'm very impressed with him in that position, given that that's not even close to his natural position.
Yeah.
And I do think there's probably a game coming where he has to play that role against a team that does try to put more pressure on you in that position. And I think about teams like as good as Barcelona, who, if they see Camavinga play there, they'll probably test a lot of runs in behind and they try to play that ball to him. I don't think Atletico Madrid in the last game, nor Real Sociedad in this game really tested him in that situation. And I think there were a couple times where Elustondo once and Kubo another time in this game that were able to get behind him and get past him with relative ease. So I do think those bigger tests are coming, but I'm just really impressed with what he did offensively too in that position. I mean, his balls over the top and down the wing to Vinicius were great. He was doing these step overs and passes, man, like he was Roberto Carlos putting crosses in. How amazed are you that this is an actual option for us?
Like, amazed, but also kind of don't really give it too much importance because we have to consider the circumstances. Camavinga was playing left back not because anyone felt like this. He was playing left back because Mondi was out, Alaba was out, and Nacho were out. And they're the three options in this squad that only has one left back ahead of him. And that's a position which pretty much certainly in the summer, there should be a left back signing. So if we look at just this season's squad, Camavinga is a fourth choice left back. Maybe after the way he's played in these, the second half against Atletico in this game here, maybe he's moved up from fourth to third. Maybe now you don't put Nacho there and you put Camavinga if both Mondi and Alaba are out. But Alaba should be back for the Valencia game. So this is kind of it's a really interesting sort of wrinkle that Camavinga is playing left back, but I think it's really just such an extraordinary situation that I don't think we're going to see it all that much. Even with France, he played left back at France. Yeah, it's also an extraordinary situation. You go to a World Cup, you have 7 games, you take 2 left backs, one of them gets injured, blows out his knee in the very first game. That changes your entire tournament. That's why Camavinga was used there. That's why he came on in the World Cup finals. So I don't think it's something we'll see all that much, to be honest. I think it's a sort of fluky set of circumstances that's put him there. But yeah, good to know that he has that option. Good to know he's so versatile that he can play left back. That makes you think maybe he could play right back if he had to. The only thing I wonder is I just hope he doesn't get Saúl. I was thinking about Saúl today. He scored for Atletico against Osasuna. I was just thinking, what a waste of a career. What a shame for him, because when he came through, he was such a good midfielder. Coming through Atletico's academy, the goal against Bayern Munich, so many other things he did. He had 2 really good years, looked like a starter, but because he was just so good, so flexible, so versatile, he just got put absolutely everywhere. I think he played everywhere apart from goalkeeper for Atletico Madrid at some point. He definitely even played striker at some point. Because he was so versatile, he got moved around so much, and it kind of just ruined his career. He never was able to grow into one position, went to Chelsea, they didn't know what to do with him. And you just hope that Camavinga's versatility, which is a positive, doesn't come back to haunt him, because you don't want him to become the guy that is next man up for whenever you have your 2 guys at one position injured. Because he should be more than that. He should be, if not a starter in midfield, the second choice after Tchouameni in midfield, and not third choice left back, third choice right back, third choice this, that. So yeah, let's hope it doesn't turn out that way.
I mean, yeah, that would be, the Saúl case is pretty sad. I mean, Simeone has a few of those where like everyone just has played every position.
Yeah.
Next. Yeah, I do think it's interesting that you see coaches do certain things and then other coaches look at it and be like, oh, I guess I can do that. Like, this happened with Marcos Llorente and then Lucho putting him at right back. This has happened now with Carlo seeing Camavinga play left back with France. And like, I feel like I already know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you think we would have seen this if Camavinga never played left back with France?
I don't know. Probably not, but then also probably yes, because with this extraordinary situation, who else would you put?
You have so many options. You could put Nacho there. You could put
but you can't because Nacho's playing right back. Because
you could promote Vinicius Tobias. There's things you can do.
Yeah,
there's Odriozola.
Yeah. Well, Vinicius Tobias is a Castilla player, and Ancelotti doesn't do Castilla players.
Yeah.
Odriozola and Ancelotti doesn't do Odriozola. So of the realistic options, and so in the press conference after this game, he was asked why not put someone like Vallejo, who at least is a defender, and why put Camavinga, which I thought was interesting to actually get like more of a tactical response. And again, it's on the press conference notes, and he said, when you're playing on the same wing as Vinicius, you need someone who's comfortable coming inside because you can't just stay outside as a left-sided fullback. And Camavinga, he said, was better for that.
And he did it well.
Yeah,
he did that part of it well. Yeah.
And I guess that's the thing with a more typical fullback, even someone who can, who's more of a winger or whatever that you could put there, they might not link as well with Vinicius. And that's, I think, Camavinga, I think we all agree, had a great performance in this game. Part of it is because what he did allowed Vinicius to do his thing. And they linked up so many times as well. I don't even know how many passes they played between the two of them and how many overlaps he did. So, it's not just playing left back, it's who you're playing behind, which Ancelotti is one of the coaches that's the biggest on this, and it doesn't have to be symmetrical. He's okay with asymmetrical lineups with the left back and right back and left wing and right wing being a bit different depending on who the wingers are. What
do you gather from Camavinga's own personal preference of playing there? Because it doesn't seem like that's what he. I think it's like
Saul, like all these players. He's so young, he's so keen, he's so ambitious. He's just happy to do whatever. We said this last season. He's got the perfect personality. He's got his head screwed on. He was happy last season coming off the bench in Champions League games. I think he's so young that he hasn't thought about this yet. But then, and I think we said the same of Rodrigo maybe 2 years ago. Then you get to a point when you're 21, 22, 23, and you do need to be starting games. And that's when I think you want to know what your position is. You want to know who the coach is, what they ask of you, and if you have opportunities. I think when you're that young, when you're still, teenager, 20, 21 maybe, you just do what the coach tells you. And if you're humble enough, you don't mind. And I think he fits that bill. So I think he's okay with it. For now, just happy to be getting minutes. But in the future, you can't just, you can't make him your emergency solution for every single position.
You haven't published the 3 questions, 3 answers piece
No,
yet.
sitting here waiting for some Wi-Fi, which now finally I have. So
understandable. I'm more asking because I'm curious to know if you can spoil anything and let us update, like give us one or two of those points maybe on the podcast.
Yeah, okay. I'll give one kind of stat as well, and then something else actually that was interesting. One stat was that the last 5 times Real Sociedad have come to play away at Real Madrid, they scored first at the Bernabeu or the Di Stefano. Last year, Real Madrid turned it around 1-4-1, but Real Sociedad got a couple of wins and a draw out of that. This is not an easy team. Like we say, this year, third best team in Spain, they're not an easy team, but even historically, they're the kind of team, especially in the Imanol era, that has frustrated Real Madrid. Like, remember that epic 4-3 Copa del Rey game on the way to them winning that. So, this time Real Madrid at least got the clean sheet. The other thing was, are Real Sociedad title contenders, which I think on this podcast I've kind of now just said every single thing Ancelotti said in the press conference, so you maybe don't have to read those quotes after this. But the other question he was asked was, are Real Sociedad in the title race? And he kind of paused for a bit, and I think he was thinking, should I say this or is this rude? And then he said, they compete in every game, but I think it's too soon. which kind of struck me as a bit odd, a bit, the kind of thing they might want to print out and put on the dressing room walls next time they play Real Madrid. But I don't know. This is a good team. Like, this is, I think the thing is just that Barca and Real Madrid are so good, so far ahead this season. But you look at the points, Real Sociedad are picking up, and last season that would have put them pretty much right in it on top. And Ancelotti spoke about the points total as well. He said, if you look at it, we basically have actually a little bit less points than we did this time last season. But the difference is this year Barcelona are good. So
yeah,
5 points now, and that's not nothing. But could all changes midweek. Real Madrid get a very terrible Valencia at home, and
that
Barca,
never means anything. But
Valencia away, but Valencia at home tends to be okay. But Mestalla is tough for Real Madrid always. But Betis away for Barcelona, that could be a tricky one. One night before, so could all change again. And after those midweek games on Wednesday and Thursday, that's officially the halfway point of the season. Everyone's played 19 games.
Diago Seal point. Just the press conference reminded me of that thing that circulated after that Barca game where someone asked him, I think if Zubimendi is good enough to play for a top team like Barca. I loved his answer saying, Real Sociedad are a top team or whatever he said, something along those lines. I like that guy so much that even when he got a yellow card in this game, I was like, I don't care. He's earned it. He's a good guy. I love the way he carries himself. I love the way he has this Real Sociedad team playing. One of my biggest fear is like one Premier League team just signs him one day, offers him.
Nah, he's not going.
I hope so. Hope not.
Maybe Spain one day, but I think he's like attached to Real Sociedad. Like
Spain would be cool. I think he would be a good option for Spain for sure. Okay. Did you want to go over anything that we missed, or we got it all?
I think that's everything. Yeah.
I'll just go through some really, really quick things in maybe 15 seconds or less.
I'll tell you.
There's no way I'm going to actually keep it to 15 seconds or less, but I'll try my best.
Sorry, that's already 15 seconds.
There was at halftime, I kind of had this weird feeling in my stomach, like a little pit in my stomach that thought we're not going to win this game despite how well we're playing, and it came true. And there was even part of me that saw that we were conceding 3 or 4 chances in the second half, and I was like, "Is this going to slip away like horribly?" And then Carlo was just going to never play this way again, and from now on, just go lowest block possible. Real Sociedad had like 3 or 4 real chances in this game. I don't think they got off good shots. Kubo, as good of a game as he had, every time he got into a shooting position, he either had a really weak shot or didn't get a shot off at all.
Yeah.
One of those chances I think would have been called offside anyway, but I think the point stood that there were moments that we slipped defensively. And I also, just the point, we didn't talk about the subs too much. Well, I guess we did. Like, just the idea of that we kind of lost the energy and some of that control when the subs came in. But I did like the fact that overall our attack was more balanced today. ESPN put out this thing in the second half where they were showing what percentage of
like the free kind of thirds, like the
exactly,
arrows.
Yeah, and it was pretty even, like basically across the field. Like left wing, right wing, and central channels, just to visualize it for anyone who doesn't know what we mean. But it was pretty even across those channels. And I think that helped with the chance creation today. It wasn't too left heavy, although at times, everything we did go through left, we also made it a point to get Fede involved on the right side or get Rodrygo involved on that side. So that I think was good. I think actually we talked about everything. We didn't really talk about Benzema. Thought he was a little bit off still. He's still not the Benzema. I mean, some of his passing was actually good. Some of it really killed our attacking momentum.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly not 100%, but even 80% of Benzema sometimes still gives you like the goal last week in Bilbao, and
and could have had assists today too.
Yeah, so considering he's not 100%, and we know it's only for the reason of coming back from injury, and that he'll get there. I don't think it's something to worry about. With each week, he should be sharper, and even while he's sharpening his tools, he's still doing quite a lot and scoring all the penalties. So
yeah. All right. Well, I'll let you go to sleep, which you won't do anyway. But at least let you get back to whatever it is you're doing.
Closer to sleep.
Closer to sleep. Yeah. Euan, thanks for your time, my friend. I hope you're warming up now, defrosting.
Yeah.
And we'll catch you next time. I appreciate your time. Thanks, Euan.
No worries. Take care.
Thanks for listening. And before we wrap it up here, we wanted to give a quick shout out to our patrons over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid, and specifically to our $10 plus patrons, because if you pledge $10 or more per month, you not only get access to everything and not only get guaranteed responses to your questions, you also get a specific shout out at the podcast. So shout out to our $10 plus patrons as follows: Brandon Alvarez, Willie Reed, Will Sousa, Wade Herring, Tobias Arroyo Botcher, Talib Salhab, Tahmid Kalam, Sushank Damala, Sujai Wani, Sumanchu Singh, Sheikh Hatiri, Shamil, Sergio Arispe, Santos Solorzano, Samuel Justin, Samar Z, Said Mohad, Sai Mohan, Sasi Kumar, Rodrigo Balmaceda, Rishi D, Phoenix, Peter Powell, Paulo Fierro, Patrick Udayafari, Oscar Barrera, Nico Laxo, Nicholas Moeller, Nick Ribeiro, Mowgli, MJ Diego, Michael Zinberg, Marin Myrtle, Matthew Atkins, Martin Ridman, Magnus Lext, Logan Stahl, Leon Stavronakis, Kunal Tilakar, Crystal Glass, Kevin Rivera, Jose Cruz, John Fernandez, Jason Fitz, Ian Marley, Graham Gerard, Gary Kohut, Frederick Rantakiro, Frederick Sunros, Faisal Hamdan, S.A. Davisito, Eloy Enriquez, Edward Sossman, Daniel Williams, Con P, Christian Toth, Christian Acosta, Charles Williams, Brendan Powers, Brandon Stevens, Ashik Bashar, Arnab Mukherjee, Arman Gashi, Armando L, Anirudh Singh, Ananya Kumar, Azaz Hussein, Adrian Rios, Adar Zalukovic, Adam Dorsey, Varun, Fabian Moreno, and Daniel Smith. We love you guys so much. Thank you so much for your support. Thanks for being a part of this family. And Hala Madrid.